Talk Show. Recorded live.
Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror, movies, and awesomeness. This week we kick off our Haunted House retrospective with the 1959 Vincent Price classic, House on Haunted Hill. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have, so warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, writer of the Ben 10 comic series from IDW. With me, also in Denver with color commentary, as always, host of the mom-oriented podcast Pod Moms, attorney Julia Guzman. Say hello.
Hello.
And in Austin today, author of the Victorian Met comic Clockworks from Humanoids and Psycom, the manga from Right Stuff, and from Tokyo Pops and lead singer of the band Deserts of Mars, Tony Salvaggio. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Hello. It feels like you haven't been on with us in a while, but maybe none of us have been on for a while.
No.
It hasn't been a while. I can't remember if I missed the last one or not, but
well, welcome back. Anyway, and finally, from Fort Worth, Texas, special guest Carrie Gamble, publisher and editor-in-chief of Monsterverse Comics, and an artist whose work has graced many, many comics from Power Man and Iron Fist and Marvel Team Up and Superman and Fallen Angels, and it's truly a great pleasure to have you on, Carrie. Say hello.
Well, thank you. Hi.
Hi.
Welcome.
Okay. All right. House on Haunted Hill. And the reason Carrie's with us actually, in fact, is he was like, I want to talk about House on Haunted Hill. So I do too. House on Haunted Hill is a 1959 American horror film. It was directed by William Castle, written by Rob White, and it stars Vincent Price. I've got it playing in my office right now, as an eccentric millionaire named Frederick Warren. He and his fourth wife, Annabelle, have invited 5 people to the house, this special haunted house, for a haunted house party. Whoever stays in the house for one night will earn $10,000 each. As the night progresses, all the guests, who, by the way, receive little coffins with, 45s in them, are trapped inside the house with, in theory, ghosts, murders, and lots of other scares. This is, that's the way Wikipedia describes this, and it doesn't begin to get at what a strange and delightful little film this is to give away my own opinion of it. All right, so let's get first impressions, and let's do it this way. Let's go Tony, Julia, Carrie, and then I'll go. Tony, House on Haunted Hill, first impressions. I'm also curious to know if you've seen this before.
I hadn't. It'd been a long time. When I rewatched it, I don't know if I dug it as much as I had hoped I would dig it again. But I do like it. I don't know if it's my favorite. So I'm hoping to. It seems like I may be in the minority, so I'm hoping to feed off of you guys as far as. But it's fun, and I like Vincent Price, and I love ghost stories and haunted house movies. So that alone gets like an extra few points just because. But I didn't like it as much as I have like some other Vincent Price movies. So.
No, understood. All right, Julia, I'm curious how you're coming to this movie and what your initial thoughts are. Julia is always our guest attorney who would never watch horror movies if we didn't tie her to the sofa and force her to watch them for the podcast.
Well, people don't need to know about the tying to the sofa, sweetheart. No, I grew up watching Vincent Price with my dad, so it makes me happy to see a movie with Vincent Price in it. But it's a fun movie. I mean, I thought it was really funny. I actually laughed a lot. I don't think it's supposed to be funny, but it's just hilarious. Like some of the effects, which I know are probably apropos of the time for the time, but now are just kind of hilarious. But
you may say that, but you jumped when that crone on the wheelies.
No, I didn't. I started laughing hysterically. I thought that was so funny.
Only if your laughter sounds like a blood-curdling scream.
Shut up. It's not true. Liar. No, I thought that was so funny. No, there were some parts, of course, that are a little startling, but mostly I think it's kind of silly. But it's a good film. I really enjoyed it.
All right. Awesome. I can't wait. All right. Carrie, welcome.
Thank you.
So House on Haunted Hill, this is one that you wanted to discuss. What are your opening thoughts here? What do we need to look out? And I'm curious about your personal history with this, if you have one.
Okay. Well, I wasn't, first of all, to correct you, though, I wasn't particularly eager to talk about this particular movie. I just wanted to get in on the first show possible because I love your podcast. And,
thanks.
And I love all things monsters and horrors and all that. So I'm happy to talk about this movie. But my favorite films are more the monster type films, the old Universal Wolfman and Dracula and Frankenstein and all that. But the ghost movies and things like that I always loved too. And I grew up. I was born in the '50s, so I kind of caught a little bit of the William Castle days as a kid. I of course didn't see this at the theater, but I did. I was aware of him from. I would see commercials on TV for his other films like The Tingler and I think 13 Ghosts. I remember seeing commercials for that. Then I saw them all on television later in the '60s when they started moving to television. So of course I never missed a film like this, and especially with Vincent Price and those kind of things. But basically, it's a very fun movie. It's not something that's has a lot of weight to it or serious scares. Although that scene with the old lady, despite what Julie said, that's one of the best scare scenes ever.
It is. It really, really is. Yeah. Do you know? So you were aware of Castle. You were probably too young for him until it came around. Have you seen The Tingler?
Yes, I actually saw like the first 30 seconds of The Tingler in a theater when I was about 5 years old. I don't know what the first feature was, but the second feature was The Tingler. And so I just remember my mom asking us if we wanted to leave or wanted to stay for this one. And we said, well, let's see how scary it is. And the opening scene is these heads screaming, coming at the camera, from the dark. And I said, no, let's get out of here. So I actually did see a little of that in the theater. But then, of course, when I was a few years older and the first time it came on television, I was just glued to it.
What I love about The Tingler, and it's been years since I saw it, but I did see it in a theater that was equipped to show it in its full coloration. It's a black and white movie with a long nightmare segment in color in the middle, and which is something really special that you wouldn't have gotten on TV, because they would have just transferred it to a black and white print.
Yeah, it was later when it came out, I guess, on DVD or maybe late VHS. They would, take the care to find those kind of things and put them back.
Yeah. So cool. That's the crazy one where for some reason there's like a centipede kind of thing that implants itself on your spine, and the only way to free yourself is to scream. But okay, my first impressions of House on Haunted Hill, it's very strange that I love this movie a lot, and that is sort of odd considering, it's kind of insubstantial. It's a wonderful 1959 picture. I think it's great because Vincent Price is hamming it up like crazy. The thing with the crone, there's a point, and we'll get into a little bit, where an old lady makes a sudden appearance, made me scream. I will tell you that is my first memory of any horror film ever, because I caught this film as a little kid in Irving, Texas, and I remember my mom had a TV that sat on the floor. It was an old black and white box, with the round knobs and all that stuff. And for some reason, in the middle of the day, like at 11 in the morning, it was playing House on Haunted Hill, and I was scared to death by the crone who goes rolling around all over the place in this movie, and also by the head in the freaking box. That when at one point the ingenue opens, I guess, a little suitcase and it has a severed head in it. This was choice horror for a 7-year-old. So, yes, I owe it all to William Castle.
Well, I think that's why I thought it was so funny, is because you had already told me that. So you're like, okay, this is the part that scared me so bad when I was 7, and then they show the lady, and I just started laughing. I just imagining a little 7-year-old Jason screaming.
You did not, though. I'm serious. I was there, and you totally were shocked by it.
All right, whatever.
Okay. So anyway, this is a William Castle movie, and so the first thing we should talk about is the tone of the film and about William Castle's, I don't know best to put it, his career and what he brought to the movies, and I think that goes with the tone. So, Carrie, would you like to give us a high-level recap of what it means that this is a movie by William Castle? In 1959 in particular?
Castle, he seemed to want to be Alfred Hitchcock, only, like the poor man's Alfred Hitchcock. And this was, remember, in the 50s, Hitchcock became really a personality that everybody knew because of his television show. And, of course, he was famous as a director for the movies from the 30s and 40s. But in the 50s, he became a real brand name and a product, and everybody. It was the only director that everybody knew, when they saw him, from what he looked like. So Castle, that seems to have been his model, and he'd been a director at Columbia Pictures for years, since the early 40s, I think, and doing movies like the Whistler series and Prime Doctor, and these sort of B pictures that were, kind of noirish and, detectives. And he did westerns and everything like that. But I think his first movie as an independent producer, or as a producer spending his own money, was called Macabre, and it was a suspenseful movie about a family whose daughter was kidnapped, and I think she was buried alive somewhere, and they had a certain amount of time to find her before she ran out of air, that kind of thing. And he came up with a gimmick for it of issuing a $1,000 life insurance policy to everyone who bought a ticket. And so I think to ensure that it would be successful, people go to see it. He came up with that gimmick to try to get him in the theater, and that's the kind of thing he's famous for. He was considered just a real showman, and he would.
Well, he had all of these gimmicks. I mean, have you seen the Mr. Sardonicus, which is about a sort of manipulative man whose face is frozen in this horrible. It's beyond. It's like the Joker, but worse. His face is
it's really very extreme makeup of this hideous grin. He wears a mask most of the time.
And that one, he came onto the screen at the beginning. William Castle did, as says, "Hey, I'm William." He's doing the whole Hitchcock thing, where he comes on and he goes, "Okay, well, towards the middle of this, we're going to have a chance to see if the bad guy is going to be killed and fall to his death or survive. It's up to you. You get to vote." I can't remember how he says it's done, by applause. And by the way, killing
they give
the bad
everyone
guy,
a little card when they go in that has a thumbs up, and you can turn it, to thumbs up and thumbs down.
Which is nonsense, because of course it never. He didn't film an alternate where the bad guy gets.
No, the way the character was in the film, everyone wanted him to die at the end.
so
he actually comes on at the end of the picture and says, "Okay, now hold your card, either up or down," and he acts like he's counting them, and then they say, "Okay, well, let's see the rest of the picture," and of course, there was only the one ending where the character died.
Well, it's interesting that you guys are talking about Alfred Hitchcock, because according to the IMDb, it says that that Alfred Hitchcock was actually inspired by The House on Haunted Hill to do Psycho, because it had such great grosses. So it was like he was like,
right.
"Well, in that case."
He saw that Castle was getting such big money.
Yeah. Well, totally. What this movie actually does, and to be honest with you, I think it's a fairly classy film. I mean, you have the basic setup is, I mean, it's such a classic setup. I grin from ear to ear when I describe it. You have this extremely rich couple who we see early on are so mean to one another. They're just constantly sarcastic and threatening one another's life. They're really, really great. And for her birthday, this is the fourth wife of the rich Vincent Price, he has rented out the supposedly haunted house.
All the others have died, by the way.
Right. All of the others have died. The new one's quite beautiful, and it's her birthday, and he's rented out a house, and he's invited 5 strangers who he does not know, and he's offered them $10,000 to stay overnight in what is supposedly a haunted house. And this plot is essentially the basic plot of a haunted house exposition story, like House on Haunted Hill or Legend of Hell House or any of those other House on Haunted Hill. I'm sorry, the haunting of Hill House. By the way, this is really confusing.
My friend Tom Weaver, I asked him if he had any tidbits about this movie, and he said that I guess James H. Nicholson was at Fox, is one of the producers of The Legend of Hell House, and he said he secured prints of The Haunting and The House on Haunted Hill and watched them over and over, and that the Roddy McDowall character in Legend of Hell House is sort of based on the Elijah Cook Jr. character from this movie.
Right.
The
There's always one of these guys.
The haunted house and explains all the ghosts and everything.
Yeah, I mean the way these stories work, there's always a group of people, each who fit sort of a mold, and there's usually the smart one who is also often the kind of skittish one, and he might be superstitious, he might be a cynic, but usually there's a smart one who knows the history of the house and is going to tell you everything. And in this one, it's Elijah Cook, who is the owner of the house and has a past experience with the house. That's another thing that happens in all of these. There's always at least one character who has a personal experience with the house, so he can constantly make references to how much danger everybody is in.
Right. He talks about how there's 7 people that died there before, and I guess one of them was his brother.
Yes.
And how there's 3 women and 4 men, and somebody makes the comment that one ghost for each of them.
For each of the people.
4 men, 3 women.
Yeah, but all of this, the movie's in black and white. It's presented. I really think it's presented quite masterfully. I mean, the direction, the camera work is all really lovely. Julia, want to tell us about this house? This crazy house?
Well, yeah. So it's really silly that this movie's supposed to take place in what is it? What year is it supposed to take place? Do you remember?
It's 1959. I mean, I think we can assume it's 59.
No. I'm sorry, not the movie taking place. No, the house is supposed to be built. It was supposed to be 100 years old. That's what it was. So it should have been built in 1859. But of course, it's a 1920s and a very modern 1920s Frank Lloyd Wright house.
Yes.
Called the exterior of it is anyway called the Ennis House, and so that's so it's a great house. But it's kind of absurd to add that line in that it's 100 years old. It's it's 30 years old, and it looks super modern even in 59.
I mean, I love that it's a haunted modern house.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really cool, and you notice
beautiful.
When they're inside, the outside of the house has this crazy Egyptian sort of facade.
Yeah.
It's got. I can't even describe it. All these sort of these.
It's all the bricks seem to have swirly patterns on them.
Yes.
But the thing is, the interior, of course, has this amazing, in real life, has this amazing stained glass window, which of course they don't have in the movie because they have the whole premise of the film is that once it's locked up, nobody has a way to get in or out because everything's locked up. So of course, if there was a big giant glass window, then that would be, the way to be out if you need it to be. Now that said, I wonder how it is that. I guess we'll get to the plot point later, but just remind me to.
Well, you can ask whatever you want.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So part of the plot is that when the hauntings, quote unquote, start, at one point one of the characters, the wife, I kind of don't want to fast forward to that yet because I want to build up to it. But anyway, one of the characters appears outside of the window. So if in fact it's not really a haunting, then how did she get out there if everything's locked up?
Oh, okay. You know what? Well, you're right. We should start talking about the plot a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So as we said, it is. We open up, by the way, with a wonderful sort of Hollywood opening where, first of all, the skittish guy, Elijah Cook, his disembodied head floats towards us and says a few ominous things. I can't even remember what he says. It doesn't matter. He's just setting the mood. And then Vincent Price sort of floats towards us and says, "Hey, I'm Vincent Price. I'm really rich. I'm renting this house, and let's meet the 5 people who are going to come." And they're each in literally a hearse. He has invited his 5 guests. Each have been picked up, and they're in a hearse. And they reiterate again, each of these guys, all of them are not really his friends. They're all people who need money. There's a newspaper columnist.
Not really his friends. He's never met them.
Right, exactly. One is a distant employee of his, works for one of the companies he owns. One is a newspaper columnist. One is an airline pilot, I think.
Yeah.
And what does that leave? Oh, yeah, well, one is the owner of the house. And he's going to pay each of them.
The test pilot. The Schroeder's a test pilot.
Right.
Ruth's a columnist.
Did you mention the doctor? The psychiatrist?
And a doctor.
Psychologist.
That's it. Yes, that's exactly right. There's a doctor. So, and that means, of course, that the two, the pilot and the young one, the girl Nora, immediately when they arrive become sort of the couple of the show. They pair off.
They're the romantic interest of the movie, basically.
Right. They're absolutely, even though not much happens between them, they pair off sort of instantly. And I actually found that really charming. I mean, I thought it was kind of neat, how this couple just sort of instantly form up and start exploring stuff together. One thing that happens quickly is that I kept thinking, imagine if this were what's great about this is I keep imagining it as if it happened in my own life. If I got invited to a party, somebody's going to pay me $10,000. And then when you get there, they say, okay, you're all locked in. You just have to stay till morning. And by the way, on the table in front of you is a little toy coffin. And in the toy coffin
but that doesn't even happen till later. Like once they have all these misadventures before they're like, oh, by the way, you all can also shoot each other.
Yeah, they all get party favors that are guns.
The really creepy guy brings up the fact that, like, well, thanks for the guns, but you can't shoot ghosts.
Right.
Also, I like that nobody's really, like, I don't remember a conversation which, if it was real, people would have, like, who invited that creepy guy and how can we all get rid of him first? Because,
are you talking about Elijah Cook?
Yeah. Man, he is just like, he knows everything about the ghosts. And they're like, that would be the first thing where I'll be like, this guy has studied this a little much.
Well, he owns it. It's his house.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just in general, like, in general, you would still be just like,
he's also
wow,
sort of a
creepy
drunk.
guy.
He gets drunk
really
and he bothers
freaking me out.
everybody.
Yeah,
what's that, Gary?
I said he's also like an alcoholic. He most of the time.
That's right. That's right.
Bothering people.
Yeah.
And instantly, everyone would want to not be anywhere near that guy. Man, he is a freak.
But that's his function in the movie,
Yeah.
Tell you about the ghosts and to be annoying and creepy.
I love the acid pit that which is
So
part
that's
of what
the thing.
you
So
have.
so he goes through. He tells everybody all the different ways where people died and everything, and so.
Yeah, you're right. We open with a tour.
Somebody was killed. Yeah, somebody was killed. A girl was killed. I guess stabbed, and so her blood stain. There's blood stain in the ceiling, and one of the characters feels blood dripping on her hand. So he's like, "Oh, now they've marked you."
Right.
So then
he's
they
the
go
voice
in.
of doom through the whole thing. He just
What?
Yes,
he's the voice of doom through it all.
Exactly.
Always taken her. They're coming for her next. They've marked you. It's always there to remind you about these.
Then they go in and check out the acid pit, and he's like, "Oh, somebody else died in here." And why they kept it is what I'm curious about.
Well,
like,
why they kept it and how, like, again, you bring them up, the house was built 100 years ago. Like, was that standard? Like, oh, yeah, we don't have garbage disposals, but we do install acid pits.
Standard.
So just throw all your stuff in the acid pit and get rid of it.
Hilarious.
Imagine what that's like. Your mom every morning is like, before you go to school, I want you to take the trash down to the acid pit.
But what did they do with it when it wasn't filled with acid? Why do you have just a pit in the bottom of your basement that you can fill with whatever,
I got to admit, there's something disturbing about just having even an empty pit under a trap.
Why is it?
If it was like a hot tub, it could be a hot tub.
Oh, wow.
Well, yeah. But
again,
an acid pit seems like it would also be like, that would be some upkeep to keep it like full of acid and the right acid and not too.
The right pH balance.
The right pH balance
for acid.
There's a nice little bit of foreshadowing there when he's explaining about the acid, and the girl almost falls in and goes, "Oh, thank God you didn't fall in. There's still acid in it." And then he goes over and gets a rat that's in a trap nearby,
conveniently,
and goes and opens the trap and lets the rat fall in there. So then you see it bubble, and then the skeleton comes up to the top. So that's a neat little preview of things to come.
That was horrible.
I think acid pits, like stuff like acid pits and quicksand, like those are, I think actual science is ruined. Like those kinds of things. Now that we kind of know that, you can escape once everybody's like, oh, it's no longer a serial thing where you can get it taken in by a,
Well, it's funny you should
like
mention quicksand. There was an article recently, and it asked, I can't remember, I think this was in Slate, but it was like, how come movies don't use quicksand anymore? And the guy was pointing out, he was like, quicksand in itself is still a kind of a scary thing, and yet nobody has used quicksand since like the 50s.
Well, I know, like quicksand and acid pits are rarely, those are the things where you're like, oh man, that's really
movies. They don't make that many of the kind of movies that you used to use quicksand for.
I guess so.
Yes.
It's a handy thing to have around in a Tarzan film or,
Romancing the Stone kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I forget. Well, Romancing the Stone came out 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's wow, that's a frightening thought, but sure.
Really?
Let's see. So yes, they take the tour, and then they go back up, and basically, if I recall, they kind of and then of course the couple, Nora. Is that her name? Is it?
Yeah.
Is it Nora and
Nora
the pilot?
And Lance.
Yeah.
Lance.
They go exploring, and then the darkness cuts out, and the pilot gets bonked on the head.
And I still don't know how that could have happened without there being ghosts. Like, if it wasn't a ghost, then how did they get into that room? Because the room is closed. No, he found a way.
Yeah,
he figured out there was a trap door type of thing.
So
right,
this amazing house also has a lot of like secret
rooms.
passages,
which also ties back when they finally decide. This is what's hard about some a movie. And I still enjoy this movie, but still the fact when they finally go, well, hey, you know what? Instead of all staying in this room where we can watch each other, let's all split up and go to separate rooms because, of course, that's how we'll find out. Except for the fact that the whole house is full of secret rooms, so anybody could get anywhere.
Well, also nobody comes of it. I mean, they say everybody go to their rooms, and if somebody comes out, we have good reason to suspect they're a bad guy.
But you wouldn't know if they came out because they can sneak around behind the walls.
Right.
All the secret passageways that may or may not exist. Like the
and
planet
two people come out and nobody says anything about it. In other words,
and then there's one point at which let's do the actual plot though before I get to it. But so yeah, you're right. So they separate, and then he gets bonked in the head, and she
sees for the first time a ghostly. This isn't the big scare with the crone. This is one where.
Now this is spooky. She actually sees her off in the doorway.
A ghostly
kind of
woman in a black, what she calls a black thing, but I think we might properly call a black dress. Is the woman sort of floats forward into, the entranceway of the basement that they're in, and then sort of floats back into the shadows. And I gotta say,
it's a very well done scene because the lights start to there's no electricity. There's like gas lights, I guess, in this big room.
Right.
For some reason, has like 10 doors, on all the walls, and the one by one the lights start to go out, and the camera's kind of following, and then there's an open doorway. And the way the thing kind of comes in from the darkness, where it comes into the light.
Yeah, how'd they do that? How'd they take the lights and put the lights out if it's a trick?
Well, I mean, I presume they have controls, but I love the sound effects that happens when the ghost, what you think is a ghost, rolls forward, and the sound effect is this sort of rattlesnake kind of like, it's really, really great. And I mean, I'm telling you, Julia, if we walked down into our basement right now and went into the laundry room and a door opened up and this woman sort of floated towards you, that would be really scary.
Yeah, heck yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I said that all the time.
She's got white eyes, by the way, if we haven't mentioned that. And frizzy white hair, and just that black dress going all the way to the floor, and she seems to sort of just glide along.
So all right,
we should glide a little and goes back. It's very creepy.
We should tell the payoff about that woman really quickly. So we see her one more time, where Nora is once again alone. And then all of a sudden, we're like focused in on Nora, and then we pull out, and there she is, and she's like right behind Nora, and she's like hunched over, and she's making a big sort of grimacy face.
Yeah.
And I mean, I just went.
With her hands out like claws. It's just,
and then she rolls by. Which made me laugh so hard. She rolls by.
Glides out of the room.
Okay, so
and her name,
on,
by the way, the character name is Miss slider, which I guess was a reference to the way she slides along.
So
yeah,
later,
that's what you were about
very
to say.
soon. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I was interrupting you. Go ahead.
No, Mrs. Slide, she's called. But so very, very soon after, we find out that the caretakers are leaving. This is also in The Haunting of Hill House, and it's also in The Legend of Hill House. You find out the caretakers are locking up, and goodbye, guys. So anybody wants to come with us.
So she's the caretaker. She's one of the caretakers.
And she is the mom of the caretaker. She's connected to the caretakers.
But
it's totally.
So it doesn't make any sense that she would be there in that room and that she wouldn't have tried to comfort her and why is she there? Why does she float out?
She's and it's unclear, is she crazy and the caretakers just bring her along because they don't have anybody to look after her? And and she's on this sort of rolling cart, so she stands there and does she slide around the house of her own volition, or
right. Even when we see the two of them and we find they're the caretakers, she doesn't talk or move or anything. She just stands there looking creepy.
Right,
creepy.
So it's conceivable that she's catatonic, except for that. This just seems like such a crazy, insane, intended to impress an 11-year-old notion, or my own nightmares, that she's catatonic and on a sliding thing like a wagon, and she's left to sort of slide all over the house.
Except what does she care for at that point? Caretaking.
Well, I assume the gliding is probably not supposed to be literal. They do that to make it scary and make her look ghost-like. Once you find out, it's just the blind caretaker woman, you're supposed to go, oh, that explains everything. But
now, here's the thing. So why doesn't she, but is she also deaf? I mean, why doesn't she hear her scream, when she sees it? By the way, Nora spends the entire film screaming bloody murder. I think that's why she was cast.
Such a good screamer.
She was cast
she's
because
so
she screams really well. But nobody hears her scream, apparently, because later on when she's screaming, people are like, oh, I heard footsteps, but they didn't hear her blood-curdling scream.
Right. But nothing in the movie makes a lot of sense. It's all just for the moment, for the effect, In fact, the one thing about the caretakers, before we see the two of them and find out who they are, there's another scene with the male caretaker, Jonas, I think is his name, or Jonah.
That's right.
Where she's got her back turned kind of in a dark corner somewhere, and his hand reaches out and grabs her from behind, covers her mouth, and pulls her back, and he says, come with us, or you'll die, or something. And she screams and runs away. And it's like, if you really wanted to warn somebody, was that the way you would do it?
Yeah, maybe just tap him on the shoulder and be, excuse me.
Right.
Clapping your hand over somebody's mouth in a hallway and whispering at them. I don't know. I mean, I guess in theory you're supposed to accept the logic that he doesn't want her to scream and alerts Vincent Price that he.
Well, you should try this at work.
Yeah.
Anytime you need to call people
all the
for a meeting,
are just
or
excuses for these things happening. We're not really supposed to think about it that much.
No, of course. It's for the fun. I'm just saying that if you really want to try this out, you should try this at work. So that when you call meetings and stuff, you come up behind people and pull them and go, we have a meeting scheduled. see if that's an effective tool for accomplishing.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, I read
it'll
about
really
that.
work.
What color is your parachute?
Exactly.
Are we clapping one another on the mouth enough?
Everybody, see? Come with us.
So they get out of there, leave everybody behind. By the way, the caretakers are like, hey, anybody want to go with us? Because we're leaving. No, bye. And then they don't even stick around.
Because he had told them, Vincent Price had told them they had till midnight to decide if they want to stay or not. And then he's like, well, I guess you don't have till midnight anymore. But one of the people, I think Nora, was like, but I wanted to leave. He's like, yeah, too bad. Sucks.
You know how you've told me many times when we go to Central America that there's such a thing as Nicaragua time?
Yeah.
When you show up for a party does not really have anything to do with
right. Yeah,
time.
If the party was, the invitation was for 7 p.m., you better be showing up at 9 p.m. or you're just rude if you come up before then because they're not ready for you.
I think this is a similar kind of logic. It's
that's the kind of time I'm always on. That's why I show up to the
It's like you should get out of here by 11. Well, 10.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Midnight. Whatever.
Yes. So that's when they're left behind. They're having a little get-together. Then they get the coffins with the 45s. And these are some nice, this is going to sound terrible, and I apologize. These are some nice-looking handguns. These are the kind of handguns that Batman carried.
And he tells them, Vincent Price tells them that they're all loaded, and he demonstrates by shooting his gun at a vase.
Right.
Awesome. Yeah. You know what we didn't know is he always hated that vase. It was his wife's, his fourth wife's. They're snarking at each other. He's like, just shoots it. What else? He's actually planning what else he could shoot of hers, if possible.
Now, I'm
that
trying
green
to think
dress,
now.
I would shoot that if I could.
Right.
There's some plot here because then,
let's
see, Mrs. Lauren kind of hits on in a blousy sort of way the pilot and says, you know, I need your help to protect me from my evil husband. And let's see. And
by the way, she's awesome at being like the vamp and just being super snarky.
Yeah,
like a terrible wife, but an awesome character.
Yeah, no, she's a wonderful character. Yeah, no, I think if you got rid of these, and to be honest with you, I've seen the remake of this film, but I don't remember a thing about these characters, which means to me that somehow they don't capture this kind of silly.
I want to say, and I can't remember that much either. I want to say that she just comes off being kind of more jerky and less, you know, I don't know. It works in this one better than the remake, if I remember correctly. But the remake,
it may be that this only works in a black and white movie from the 50s. You know, that it's just absurd.
Her character is kind of that time too. There, you know, that type of character worked in a way as well.
I read that the writer of the movie was actually going through a divorce. So there's all this great back and forth between the husband and wife. But it's cool the way they play this, where it's like he's trying to kill her and she's trying to kill him, and you're not sure which one of them is telling the truth and what the real motives are. It just keeps you guessing through the thing. You know, he jokes about, remember the fun we had when you poisoned me, and he's hinting at you know what happened to his earlier wives and all this. So you don't know what to make of either one of these characters. It's a nice.
Now that you mentioned that, I kind of wish it could have gone in a different way, where they're really, really using. I mean, like wholeheartedly using everybody as pawns. Yeah. Like if they had really, really because I mean it happens, but if they really delved into that, so it's obvious that, hey, we've called everybody here, and they're just such jerks about it, you know, and they're really like endangering each other, and it becomes almost like a
War of the Roses
game of death, like kind of thing. That would have been cool too. You know,
that's a good point, because
it's more of a haunted house. You know, they rightly so. It's a haunted house movie. But it would be interesting to see a similar movie where, you know, everybody is a pawn for for these two. That would be really cool.
Well, that's part of the fun, is finding out what's really going on and who's working with who and that kind of thing.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about the fact that you've got the doctor, the doctor who very quickly reveals, and I apologize for jumping to this, but this is kind of where we are. Very quickly, you find out, though, that the doctor and Miss Lauren actually do know one another. They are lovers.
Well, okay. So what happens is because you skip past the scene where we find out where we get the hanging. So
that's right. Okay, I'm so sorry.
So they have So there's some of the guests discover a body has been hanged, and what's his name? The Schroeder, Lance. Assumes that it's Nora. He's afraid that it's Nora. He's like, you know, thinking that it might be her. And
you just see the feet.
Because we only see the feet, right?
Down.
But it turns out once they lay her down and everything, and look at her, that it's actually the wife of Vincent Price's character. And so she's laid to rest in this bed and like all, you know, Sleeping Beauty style or whatever. And then, so after a while we find, so then poor Nora, who's completely going insane and having all kinds of visions.
Yeah, she keeps seeing terrible, crazy things.
And screaming all the time. She sees this really scary vision, which again, if it's a trick, I don't know how they did it, because she sees this is what I was talking about earlier, that she sees the ghost, quote unquote, of Mrs. Lauren outside her window, and then this rope, this like snake rope, comes in the window and approaches her, wraps around Nora's feet, and then unwraps and comes back out again. So the question is, how did they do the rope trick, and how did she get outside, or is that really all? Is she going crazy and just seeing things?
Well, they're trying to drive her crazy.
So in which case, how did they do the rope trick then?
Well, they don't explain it. You're supposed to believe somehow they were able to do that.
Yeah.
But everything that happens to her in the movie was intended to drive her into hysterics.
Right.
Yes.
Because, of course, the woman is really alive, we found out later, and she is trying to get Nora to shoot Vincent Price. Because she really is trying to kill him.
Right.
And so
it turns out
with everything that happened. Yeah, you see her later with a harness on. The hanging was a trick, and she was wearing this vest that kept her from choking, and she takes that. It's kind of a funny little scene when the doctor comes in and sees her body there, and then it looks like she's dead. She actually had fallen asleep, and she sort of starts breathing and gets up and what's happening, darling?
That's a neat payoff.
When you find out that they're working together.
Yeah. And you find out they're working together. So somehow that means that Mrs. Lauren managed to manipulate Vincent Price into inviting her lover to this party. So that's groovy. And then they have worked. They know that they worked poor Nora into a lather, so that she will hopefully wind up shooting Vincent Price. And now, what I'm trying to remember,
except that Vincent Price never put. That's what I was saying earlier about how he tells them all that the guns are loaded, but in fact he didn't. He loaded them with blanks, except for his own, of course. So when she does shoot him, which I guess he already knew. I don't know how he figures out what the plan is, but he goes down to the room with the acid vat room, and that's where he walks in and she shoots him. But he already knew, I guess, that was going to happen or something. So he plays dead. So Nora goes away thinking she's now killed him, and the lover of the wife, the doctor guy, comes in to dispose of the body and throw it into the vat. At which point the screen goes black.
That was something that made no sense, though. They went to all this trouble to get Nora to shoot him.
Yes.
And then they're going to throw his body in the acid. Why did they need to do that?
Right, I know.
You should accomplish that with a rope and a tripping rope, which they had plenty of rope.
Yeah.
So that would be appropriate. Oh, how'd that happen? Well, rope is everywhere. Seems to hang people for no good reason. Tripping in an acid bath seems to be something that can happen. So,
anyway,
that
you were saying, the lights go out when he's about to throw Price into the acid.
Right, so you assume that they just don't want to show you Vincent Price getting thrown into the acid, I guess? But in fact...
Well, you hear a struggle and a splash.
Yeah.
You don't really know what happened.
But in fact what happened is that he was already on to them, and he just I guess, dumped the doctor into the acid, which is kind of horrific.
Yes.
I mean, just imagine he's alive. And
But this is a great twist, because, twist 1, wife is alive. Wow.
Right.
Twist 2, the doctor's her lover. Wow. And then you get to this, in the blackout. And then twist 3, Vincent Price walks out of the shadows. He's alive. I mean, that's... And they're throwing these...
Before he walks out of the shadows, first the lights go out, we hear the splash, we don't know what happened, and then that's when Annabelle, the wife, comes down looking for her lover.
Yes.
And then the big scene where
the skeleton.
From the acid floats this skeleton, who's supposedly Vincent Price, although it must have gotten much shorter. The skeleton is about 5 feet tall.
That's the
and the
big
skeleton
chaos
pushes
scare.
her into the acid, and then Vincent Price walks out, and he's been working this skeleton by wires.
Yeah, but he actually talks to her and says something like about...
Right,
like
you hear his voice.
Contraption, like his puppeteer contraption is pretty awesome. Now, how she did the wires is, there's a lot of moving parts to this plan. This is actually why I think a lot of like when you go overly complicated, I think a lot of it fall apart. Like even in something like Dr. Five, he has kind of one thing going on at once.
Yeah.
And so even those are pretty expansive, but they're like, I'm going to do this to somebody, one thing at a time.
Yeah.
But this one involves a lot
tropes.
of things happening the right way, including, getting someone down and then showing them a puppet skeleton, which is awesome, but still. And also, just don't step near the acid bath, I think would be a good
rule of thumb.
Yes, I'd like to know how a puppet operated on wires manages to push somebody into acid anyway.
Well, it's her hysterics, I think. She falls in, but you're like, why is your back to an acid pit? Lady, come on. But, I mean, then we wouldn't have the cool acid death that we have. I mean, we're not supposed to really think about that, but I was like, this is a complicated, kind of terrible plan. Yeah,
and then it sort of has this sort of weird non-ending where Price, kind of explains that they were trying to kill me, so I killed them, and I'll let the law decide my fate, and walks out of the scene, and that's it.
You really get the impression. By the way, I'll let the law decide my fate. You really get the impression that that's a line put in sort of at the urging of the studio or whoever, because you don't.
Right.
I don't
yeah.
actually.
You can really let people get away with stuff. That's the way all of Hitchcock's TV shows got away with things. It looked like if you saw the show that somebody got away with murder, and then Hitchcock would come on at the very end and gave some outlandish, humorous ending to it. By the way, they got caught, later, and he throws some joke about how they got caught, by doing some ridiculous thing, and part of that was so that technically they didn't get away with it.
Right, right. I mean, I'm a huge sucker for Dragnet, by the way, lately, watching a lot of Dragnet. And that's my favorite part of the show is at the end where they go, Vincent Price was convicted of double murder and sentenced to 33 years, 11
Now serving his sentence.
Right. I want to say that this guy, probably in reality, he opens up the door, locks him back in the vault, and then retires to South America.
Right.
Yes.
The law will decide my fate in another country if they catch me.
Right.
Yeah.
But my fifth wife.
He probably had the caretakers working for him, and they were in driving a getaway car.
It'd be really funny since they're in the basement if he walked out, got in his car, and then set off something that flooded the basement.
Oh God.
With that.
Acid.
Double awesome.
But they do end though with the hint that the ghosts are real. Elijah Cook looks right at the camera. He breaks that fourth wall and says, now the ghosts are coming for me, and then they'll come for you. And you hear all that scary laughing and, stuff.
That is creepy.
So they do keep you with that. It is still a haunted house.
Yeah, except none of the ghosts, the funny part is they even try to continue with that, because none of the ghosts are really real. He's just a crazy crackpot.
Yes.
Other than the blood.
But there has been all these murders there, so it's like...
Right.
There are ghosts there from all these murdered people, but they're really not doing anything.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I don't know. The chandelier does fall. So that's possibly something.
Yeah, but that's probably set off by the crazy lovers too.
Exactly.
I mean, it's really hard. So it's so funny to think of this movie in the context of The Haunting of Hill House or Legend of Hell House, where the haunting is for real, and there's no Scooby-Dooism to it.
Well, when this movie came out, critics were comparing it to The Cat and the Canary a lot. Is that kind of a film where you thought there was some, monster or creature who was after this girl in an old mansion with, secret passages and all this stuff? And there are a lot of movies and plays like that.
Oh, absolutely. What's the one where Bela Lugosi is the guy who supposedly is a vampire who has returned with his daughter?
Right, Mark of the Vampire.
Mark of the Vampire, yes.
Right, which was a remake of a silent film called London After Midnight, which is a lost film.
Right,
it has Lon Chaney Sr., and the vampires turn out to be actors, trying to catch the criminal.
That's even disappointing to me about either one of those, I kind of feel like...
But that was the standard thing back in the 20s and around that time, they had very little real supernatural thing. They would make things would look supernatural, then they would explain them away at the end. That's kind of the way The Cat and the Canary did, and the way this film did, kind of in that tradition.
Is the Bob Hope version worth watching? If I were going to go watch Cat and the Canary.
It's very good. Yes, it is good.
Yeah, 'cause I know it's
film
been
that's
made a
more
lot.
famous and you see a lot more is Ghostbreakers, which is a really good film. And I didn't realize till recently that Ghostbreakers was a follow-up to Cat in the Canary because it had been such a big hit.
I had no idea about that because I have seen Ghostbreakers, and I thought it was hilarious. And it's kind of it's a groovy Bob Hope comedy for sure.
Yeah, I love it.
All right, so we should definitely wrap up and give our final thoughts about House on Haunted Hill, which is kicking off our haunted house retrospective with this curious little movie. So let's go in the same order, and then we're going to come around again for endorsements, which is like one of my favorite parts of the whole show. So let's go Tony, Julia, Carrie, and then I'll go final thoughts. We'll keep them brief and come around for endorsements. Tony, House on Haunted Hill.
I really enjoyed it. I mean, it's got a lot of kind of goofiness, but I mean, that's kind of a time. And Vincent Price, I mean, it's Vincent Price and hauntings and, a true locked room, I guess, locked mansion mystery.
Yeah.
And that's all, pretty good. Is it my favorite Vincent Price movie? Probably not. But it's fun, and, the plot turns are actually pretty cool. I think there's, I wish they would have gotten a better remake than the one it got, somehow.
Does it have the same payoff, the remake? Is it the same?
I don't even remember. That's what's bad,
Yeah.
There's arguably, it's one of those where you could take a movie like this, I think, and do what The Thing did, you could make an even better movie, because of just kind of how goofy it is, as opposed to The Haunting, where I don't know if you could make a better movie than the original Haunting off of that. And
yeah.
obviously they didn't, because the remake was awful. But
yeah.
but I enjoyed it. It's not my favorite, but it was a good kickoff movie, and it's always, like I said, it's always fun to see, ghost movie, mystery movie with Vincent Price. Like it's really really hard to go wrong with that. So
thank you, Julia. What are your final thoughts? House on Haunted Hill.
Well, just like I said, it's a lot of fun. I think the fact that it's so that there are so many things that don't really make sense, or the little continuity things, or whatever, it's part of what makes it so much fun. So I'm glad we watched it.
Very cool. Carrie, what are your final thoughts? House on Haunted Hill.
I feel like there's a lot that we didn't cover that we should have. I was gone for a little while. I don't know if you noticed. My phone started beeping because the battery was dying, so I had to hang up my landline and call back on my cell phone. So I missed a couple of minutes. But did we mention about the house that they used for the exterior was called the Ennis House, Frank Lloyd Wright house design. Although on the inside it's a 100-year-old house, but the outside, it looks like a modern
1920. Yeah.
The movie itself, I like it a lot. It's a lot of fun, especially that one big scare with the old woman. Every time, those two scenes she has are really noteworthy. It was important for Vincent Price because this is just when he was really becoming a horror star. He'd been in Invisible Man Returns in 1939, one of his very first movies, but that really didn't register with most people. And it wasn't until House of Wax that he really made a full-fledged horror film. But, that was just sort of a, one-time thing back then. But then when Castle got him for this, and right after this, they made The Tingler. And I think The Fly was made the same year, maybe the year before this. So that was the time when he really became a horror star, and that became what he was really known for. So this is one of the early films where Vincent Price is really Vincent Price. So this is a good movie for that itself. And if there was anything else I wanted to mention before we go. Oh, did we mention the Emerjo with the skeleton? We talked about the movie where the skeleton comes out. And so this was the film that had this kind of notorious gimmick of having a skeleton come out of a little box or behind a curtain or something during that scene where the skeleton rises up out of the acid pit. The skeleton in the original theatrical run, they had a skeleton on a wire that floated out over the audience, and it was just like an inflated, balloon with a skeleton on it, and apparently it didn't scare anyone. It just became something people would throw popcorn at and throw candy
Well,
at.
it said in the thing that they stopped doing it because boys started bringing what do you call them?
Slingshots and things.
The slingshots, yeah, the slingshots and shooting them with BBs and whatever else they had.
Which is too convenient. I don't know. That sounds apocryphal to me, but it's possible.
I'm sure it happened some places, but I don't know if it was widespread. But anyway, that was what people went to see it to see what that gimmick was all about, and whether they remembered the movie or not. They told their friends, "You got to go see this thing," and the skeleton comes out. So that was part of what made its reputation was those gimmicks like Emergo, and then for the Tingler, William Castle used like joy buzzers under some of the seats in the theaters, and it's
and that was what he was known for. That was William Castle's thing, was these crazy stunts.
Right.
I'm guessing
and if
the
you've
lawyers...
ever seen, there's a movie called Matinee, directed by Joe Dante.
Oh, yeah.
That John Goodman plays a filmmaker who's based on William Castle, and it's one of my favorite movies of that period, and they really capture the early 60s in that film. So if anyone hasn't seen Matinee, I recommend they see that.
It was on Netflix for a while because I got to catch it, so hopefully it might still be there. I have to double check. Like I said, I guess the lawyers vetoed, they did Emergo because, pushing a member of the audience into an acid pit every day. That's probably that's a kibosh on that. I get this. We have an acid pit, and one person goes in per night. How about that? Well, how about if we have a skeleton on a balloon instead?
And
okay.
I found out I was watching the documentary on William Castle that comes with the William Castle DVD set, and his first job in show business was working on the Broadway production of Dracula. He went and saw it with Bela Lugosi starring as Dracula, and managed to meet Lugosi in person somehow and tell him how much he liked it, and Lugosi liked him, and they hired him as a production or assistant stage manager. And Dracula was one of those plays. Even back then, they would have ambulances and nurses in the lobby and stuff like that. So that was really kind of the beginning of his gimmicky things, was being involved in stage shows like that actually relied partly on those kind of over-the-top gimmicks to get audiences interested.
I mean, I have no complaint about that at all, even though I think this is a fine little bizarre thriller. I have no complaints about hokying things up. I think that's what makes the Alamo such a delight, is that they have no compunction about doing crazy shtick, to go along with the movie. Thank you very much. So my final thoughts are, this is a movie that you definitely can catch almost anywhere because it's in the public domain. That also so it means you can get 1 million collection DVDs that have it on it. You can catch it on Amazon Prime for free. It's on YouTube for free. You can rent, for $4 the Riff Tracks version where the MST3K guys do a version because, again, it's public domain, so anybody can do their own version of House on Haunted Hill. I really find this movie very enjoyable. I've seen it a number of times, and it just has a nice sort of spooky mood. There's something wonderfully old-fashioned about it that I really admire. So let's go to endorsements. That one thing or two things that you totally recommend that people go run out and consume if they get the chance. Same direction. Tony, do you have anything to endorse for us?
I can't remember if I endorsed this or not, or if I got to be The Haunted Palace that has Vincent Price in it. You should see this because it's actually why it's called The Haunted Palace is pretty ridiculous. It's a Roger Corman movie, but it's actually Lovecraft, Case of Charles Dexter Ward.
Yeah.
And it's one of the best. It's a really good adaptation, I think, with a lot of really awesome Vincent Price-ness in it. And I got to see it up at Numathon. That was super cool to see that on the big screen. I think Harry's programming of that was pretty awesome. And I highly recommend seeing The Haunted Palace. It was really, really cool.
That's 1963.
Yeah, and it's really, there's some really great stuff in there. Is it perfect? No. This is another one that could use a remake. I think you could do a really awesome job with the right director, and getting it re-released actually with as a Lovecraft adaptation would be really awesome. They were talking about trying to do that with a proper poster and renaming it back. Who knows if that'll happen, but that's something they want to do with the Draft House if possible. There was hey, let's do this, fan outcry. But I really, really enjoyed that movie, and I don't think I had seen it. I think I'd seen maybe part of it, but I'd never seen it in its entirety. And so I got to add it
something
to my,
I don't think I've ever
cool Lovecraft adaptations. Why, the fact it's called Haunted Palace, you fly under the radar. You go, oh, it's a Roger Corman movie. It may or may not be for me, but if you're a horror fan, I think it would, capture more people's attention if it was, By the way, this is a Lovecraft thing as well. Also, in kind of not in horror movie news, I got the Zatoichi Criterion box set for Christmas, and that thing is beautiful. 25 movies. I got a super great deal. It's expensive.
What is the series about?
Zatoichi the Blind Swordsman. So it's a samurai series, just really well made. Again, it's 25 movies on Blu-ray and DVD, so you can pick your format. And really excellent presentation. A huge box set with liner notes in this other booklet, hardbound booklet with art. There's different artists on each movie. I lucked out and got it not only for a half-price Criterion sale, but they had a Black Friday 30% off, which is big furloughed the only way I got convinced, hey, you can get this $200-something box set for $85. That was a steal. But I highly recommend that. It took me a while to burn through them, but just there's some awesome samurai flicks.
I think being furloughed is the only time you'll have time to
yeah, probably so. I think that's probably it. In between trying to, keep writing music, I've been, staying up late and watching samurai movies, and the actor who plays Zatoichi just really does an excellent job. And there's even a Zatoichi meets the one-armed swordsman from China. And that crossover is really great. It's just a wonderful, there's just such cool stuff going on. I highly recommend it. Criterion really outdid themselves with this set. So if you can find it for, if you have the money, awesome. If you can find it for cheaper, even better. But either way, you should check it out.
Very good tip. All right. Julia, do you have any endorsements for us this time around?
Yeah, Jason and I have been watching this hilarious show called The Spoils of Babylon on the IFC channel, Independent Film Channel, so I guess it would be channel if I say IFC channel. Anyway, it's so funny. It's basically a parody of epic, whatever those series. They're kind of like a soap opera series. What was one example, Jason? That
it's a parody of overblown miniseries like Mistral's Daughter and Centennial and Winds of War and War and Remembrance and all that.
So it's supposedly every episode opens with Will Ferrell, and Will Ferrell pretends to be the director, writer, or whatever. But he's crazy, and so he doesn't know what to do with this show. So from episode to episode, he changes styles completely, and sometimes it's black and white, or sometimes it's suddenly it feels like it's Victorian. It's just so funny. And then it stars Kristen Wiig and Tobey Maguire, and and then there's Tim Robbins is in it. At one point, Will Ferrell says that Tim Robbins' character is played by a British actor. So of course, Tim Robbins every once in a while suddenly laughs into a British accent. It's just so funny. It's the funniest show. So if anybody get a chance to see Spoils of Babylon, you should do it.
I think it's on IFC.
Yeah, that's what I said, the IFC channel,
yeah.
and then I said I'm Independent Film Channel.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, it is. Spoils of Babylon is truly an amazing find, and I was just astonished by it. It's a delight. All right, Mr. Carey, thank you so much for joining us. What would you like to endorse?
Well, I love both of those endorsements. I'm enjoying the Spoils of Babylon, and The Haunted Palace is actually a film that I saw when it was new at the theater. It scared the crap out of me sitting at a big dark theater when I was like 8 years old. Vincent Price, Lon Chaney Jr.
So good.
And it's called The Haunted Palace because they were making all those Poe films, and they had Vincent Price in, the House of Usher and
right.
Pit and the Pendulum and all that. So they had this story based on Lovecraft, but they found there's a poem by Edgar Allan Poe called The Haunted Palace, and they recite some of that poem during the movie. But it is a Lovecraft film, but they just thought it was more commercial to make it look like it was another Edgar Allan Poe, Corman Price movie. But it's a very good movie. It's a lot of some good atmosphere in there. Price is great in it, and so I agree with both of those. As far as endorsements, since I'll just take the chance here to plug my own stuff here.
You should. We all have no problem doing that.
Great. Okay. Well, Monsterverse Comics is my publishing company, and we publish a comic called Bela Lugosi's Tales from the Grave, and also a series of graphic novels called Flesh and Blood, which is very much inspired by Hammer Films' version of Vlad Dracula and Frankenstein. It's a big epic thing. We have 3 books out now. There'll be one more to complete the series, but they're each kind of self-contained. But we have Baron Frankenstein and Count Dracula, and there's werewolves and Dr. Jekyll and Carmilla, and all these are literary characters, but sort of filtered through the Hammer Films version. So if you're a fan of the Hammer Films, I think you'd really enjoy those. It's by Robert Tennille and Neil Vokes. And again, it's called Flesh and Blood. Bela Lugosi's Tales from the Grave is just our version of Tales from the Crypt or Creepy Magazine, the kind of classic horror comics that were anthology books. So there's 3 or 4 stories in each issue, and they all have kind of twist ending. And Bela Lugosi is our host, like the Crypt Keeper or like
okay, you got to answer me about this because I've been reading Bela Lugosi's Tales from the Grave, or at least I read the first volume. And so how did this come about? By the way, I love it, and I've endorsed it here on the show.
Thank you.
How did are you working with the Lugosi estate to get have Lugosi hosting this thing, or how?
We licensed the Lugosi name and likeness from the estate, Bela Lugosi Jr. And these kind of things, and his daughter Lynn. She's a real sweetheart. So we work with them pretty closely on these things. So they just want to approve everything that has Lugosi's image on it, so that they make sure that we don't throw out any, thing that's too gory or sexy or bloody or, something that would damage the image of Bela Lugosi. But of course, we're always on the same page as far as the kind of tone that we want to present. My idea for the thing was basically because I drew comics for years for Marvel and DC and things, and then I got out of that for a while and did mostly advertising and promotion agency work. But then I came back and realized I want to do comics again, but I want to do something of my own, and I don't want to do superheroes anymore because I love horror much more than your basic superhero kind of comics. And I never got to draw horror comics during my professional career, so I'm just going to do it myself and publish them. And I had known Lugosi Jr. From some other projects. I did some DVD graphic arts for some things he put out, and we had talked years ago about doing some comic book things. So I approached him about the idea of doing this anthology comic with his dad hosting it, which to me it's as close as we can come to having a show like Thriller from the 60s with Karloff. He would introduce these things, and every time I see that show, I think, wouldn't Lugosi have been so cool to see him if he lived a few more years, or if they'd done a show in the early 50s and had Bela Lugosi introduce him, because of all the horror stars, he's the one that had that really odd, sinister kind of presence. You know, Karloff out of makeup, you know, was basically an English gentleman, and with a lisp, you know. Chaney Jr. was just this guy from Oklahoma and everything, and but Lugosi just looks, you know, and sounds like something from another world, and so it was just something for the fun of it that I wanted to do, and approached him about it, and got enough people to help contribute to it to get it going, and we've got 4 issues out so far, and I'm working on the 5th one. It'll be out pretty soon. So it's just basically something to feed my love of horror comics and movies all together.
That's awesome too, man. I need to actually read those. Jason's been endorsing them, so
yeah,
check it out.
And our website is monsterverse.com. So if you're interested in that, or look us up on Facebook. And
Flesh and Blood is really amazing too. I think I've talked about that as well. That's by Vokes and Tennell, you know, who I met many, many years ago at a horror convention in New Jersey, and that's just amazing, man. Because they've got like the characters. You know, Frankenstein looks like Peter Cushing, and Van Helsing looks kind of like a young Peter Cushing. It's clever. It's really, really clever, and I've just been really impressed with that.
Yeah, I think we just hit all the right notes, and we're just very proud to be the publisher of it.
And you're working with you're also you're working with our comrade Drew on Halloween Man, which is super
we do we have some digital comics too that are distributed through Comixology, which you don't really download them, but you can access them through your iPad or your computer. And
you do. Yeah, with Comixology, you access through. I use it all the time, but it'll download the comic onto your.
Right. Yeah, but it's not like a PDF or something. It's through their app. You know, you can get it, and so we're working right now on submitting Halloween Man through that, and then Drew's also writing a story for one of the Bela Lugosi comics. It's really cool. Kind of a science fiction horror thing. It's got a nice twist at the end.
That's
very cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, Jason, horror comics are Jason and I's. We have a couple that we've long been pitching as well, so they're near and dear to our heart. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, keep Monsterverse in mind when you have another project.
Okay. Well, yeah, we may be talking to you about that. All right. Let's see. My own endorsement. What I want to talk about really quickly is first of all, Haunted Horror is a hardback that IDW put out with Yo Books, actually. But it came from IDW, and it's a collection of 1950s EC and EC style comics. Many of them that were banned, a lot of really grody stuff, but it's just so wonderful. I mean, you've got artists like Jack Kirby and others doing these. It's got an introduction by Jerry Only of the Misfits. And this is just like, what is it? It's nearly 200. It's like 155 pages. There we go. Of wild early 50s 4-color horror comics. Like guy picks up a girl in the swamp and kind of makes out with her, but he has to break it off because he's got to go murder his new wife so he can take all her money, and he comes back to meet his lover in the swamp, and she turns out to be a swamp creature. That kind of thing. And it's nonsense. It's wonderful. So I'm really loving that. And the other thing that Spoils of Babylon. So Joya got it. So yes, my big endorsement was Haunted Horror. And Tony, thank you for mentioning Haunted Palace, because to be honest with you, I'm almost embarrassed. I'm totally embarrassed to say this. I have never seen the Haunted Palace.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, that's one of the awesome things about But Numathon is,
But Numathon, the 24-hour movie festival.
Yeah, Harry Knowles of Ain't It Cool News birthday party / screening event, and he pulls sometimes some deep cuts or some things where. Like, for example, I had seen Agony and Ecstasy, in art school, and it really changed a lot of things. But for this, we got to, a bunch of people hadn't seen it, and not only that, but we got to see it in 70 millimeter.
Yeah.
So, he'll pull out, because we watched an actual movie about Poe after that. The way he arranges his programming is pretty awesome.
No, he does a fantastic job.
And so seeing, this where I might have seen parts of it, there's always a gem that even if somebody else has seen it, you may or may not have, or your neighbor may, in the seat next to you has seen it, you haven't, or vice versa. And so, so I highly recommend checking it out, and hopefully, it'd be cool to see an actual, then to rearrange it and make a Charles Dexter Ward poster, release it.
I meant to mention the Haunted Palace is out now on Blu-ray. There's a Vincent Price post set that has just come out that includes the Haunted Palace.
Oh, yeah, that's right, because I know somebody had mentioned that. I totally forgot about that. That's cool.
Well, but do you know something really strange? The truth of the matter is, now I watched this movie on DVD, but we could have watched it on Amazon. But, Carrie, it's coming to the point where I only watch things on streaming. In other words, if I can't bring it up on Netflix or Amazon or one of the other various streaming solutions I have, I'm less likely to watch it, whatever it is.
Oh, see, I can't, my thing is, I think that's cool, and much to the chagrin of my long-suffering wife, who I collect too many things. For example, I got the new remastered RoboCop, and it looks awesome. And if I have yet to see anything with the download speed that I can get, there's no way I could stream anything that looks as good as this RoboCop remaster.
No,
by the way,
I'm with
this new RoboCop remaster was $8 on Amazon. I think it went back up to $16. But if you are a fan, that's another endorsement. I'm sorry, plug it again. But that's my big difference is why I still get stuff. It's definitely more convenient, but until we get a Google Fiber, nothing's going to look like that because it looks great. I mean, they left all the film grain in. There's all kinds of crazy commentary and stuff like that. And, it was a steal. I felt almost bad for getting it for $1. At the point where I'll believe streaming is the only way at the point when streaming looks like stuff like that.
Well, that
streaming looks like a Blu-ray. That's the point where I'm in. And I think Rain will probably be happier.
Right.
Because there will be less stacks of things everywhere.
Well, there you go. No, and that totally makes sense. But as Carrie pointed out, it's come to the point of being just a matter of convenience. And I have such odd taste that a lot of the crap that I watch would not benefit from being in high def. And truly a crackpot Jean Roland, sexy vampire movie from the late '60s. There is no such thing as a high def version. It's, and it might even suffer. Sometimes with these movies, what I want is a grainy, poor, overread transfer that really feels like somehow you're watching it at a drive-in or maybe at the Midnight Weird Wednesday show at the Alamo. Well, I am so delighted. This was a lot of fun to discuss, and Carrie, I'm so happy that you could be with us.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Joy and Tony, as always, a delight to talk to you. And everybody, like us on Facebook, ask us questions, challenge our opinions, because we're arrogant and we will definitely try to debate. We actually won't, but we'll debate a little bit. Most likely we'll just agree with you and be thankful, because please leave comments on our Facebook page, and we will talk to you guys soon and let everybody know. And we'll be back next week with more haunted kind of stuff. Thanks, everybody.
Night.
Night.